Welcome to the What's New in TPC Desktop 2018 web seminar. And our agenda this morning, we're going to start by looking at the CAD File Xrefs, followed by tangent intersections. Those are the two biggest pieces of this release. Then we're going to look at the new leader options, selecting and editing points improvements, drawing data manager, LandXML surfaces with hidden faces, legal description decimal places, path options in the tasks manager, some changes to the generic raw data CSV, import export, improvements to the traverse, drawing, and surfaces groups, followed by questions and answers and resources. And before I go any further, I want to point out in this PowerPoint presentation, if you download it later on, all of these underlined blue links are live links. So you'll see those in the PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to follow them if you download it. Let's take a look at inserting X references into a drawing. I'm working with a file. This is the Fred Meyer project we did a few years ago. And in the past, what we would have done, we had our initial field survey data, and then the engineers sent us their layouts and all of that stuff. And in the past, we would have gone in and imported data into the drawing to import that CAD file into the drawing. And that has worked very well, but there are some drawbacks to that. So about a year and a half ago, I think, we brought out the CAD view, which allows us to open CAD files. And let's go ahead and open this one. So this is the file that the engineers sent us back with all of their layouts and stuff. So then in the CAD view, we were able to send stuff over to the drawing view, convert things to survey, things like that. But there are still some drawbacks to doing that. So we're now introducing X references, and here's how that works. In the drawing view, we can now insert X reference. We'll browse for our AutoCAD file right here, regenerate the drawing, and it pops in here, just as if we had imported this into the drawing. Well, not quite. Here's the difference. So when you import a DWG into your drawing, it's all of the individual objects just inserted into this drawing. Now in this case, we've inserted an X reference, and you can see that all of that data in that DWG file is highlighted there, and it contains over 3,000 objects. We've inserted this into the drawing. Now the real advantage of this is that this is live with the DWG file. So if you've inserted an X reference and something changes in the DWG file, whatever it is, and I'm just going to draw a circle in here and save this file. Now if I come back to my drawing and regenerate it, that circle has now appeared here. So this is live with any changes that happen in your DWG file. Go back to the CAD view and delete this circle. Save the file, regenerate the drawing, and the drawing is now up to date with the CAD file. So that's the big advantage of using an X reference. Now, all of these objects in the drawing view, you can interact with them the same as you could any other object. If you had imported this CAD file, basically I can interact with it the same way I could interact with anything else. So if I wanted to do, if I wanted to find out how far these parking spaces are from the property line, I could go in and draw a dynamic offset I'll do, look down here, we can do snaps. So I'm going to press E for end and click on this line, and it snaps to the end of that line. I'll do a P for a perpendicular, and it snaps perpendicular to my lot line. So I can go ahead and check this stuff. So I can interact with this as if these were individual objects, except that I can't move them. All right. Whereas with lines from a CAD file that's imported, you could accidentally move them and things like that. So I can still interact with these the way I need to. Oops, didn't get the dynamic offset itself. Let's get that out of the way. So I can still interact with this. Now, what about the layers? We all know that CAD files come in with a gazillion layers because they have these templates set up with all the layers they're ever going to need, whether they need them on the project or not. Well, if we go into the layers dialog box, all we're seeing is the Travers PC layers. But right down here, I can tell it that I want to see the Xreference layers. So when I turn this on, and now I can also ignore layers with a 0 count. See how long this list is? If I ignore layers with a 0 count, the list is just those layers in the CAD file. So I can interact with these layers however I choose to right here. And I can interact with them the same way I can interact with any other layers. Let's take a look at the Drawing Data Manager. We're going to talk more about the Drawing Data Manager. Well, probably not. I'll probably cover it right here. When we go to the Drawing Data Manager, you see we've got a new Xreferences. And by the way, if you're not using the Drawing Data Manager, you should be. It gives you access to everything in your drawing, even if you can't see it. So here's this Xreference here. And I can interact with the Xreference here just as well as I can interact with it in the drawing view. So if I right-click, I can go to Xreferences and I have all my different options here. Same as I do in the Drawing Data Manager. So I could come in here and I could bind this Xreference to the survey. Now, for those of you who are familiar with CAD programs, this is the same bind that you're used to there, really. What this does is this converts it to individual objects within the drawing. It unlinks it from the original CAD file. It's no longer live because they're the individual objects then. I can also bind it into a group. So I've got the individual objects and they're grouped within Travers PC. So you've got all of the same options here in the Drawing Data Manager. If we go up to layers, we can see, once again, we're seeing the Travers PC layers that are in use. And if I expand the Xreferences, here are all the layers that are in the Xreference. All right. Now, what's really nice here is that we've added delineation to the Drawing Data Manager. So if I delineate right now, it highlights the entire Xreference because that's what I've selected. If I click on striping, you can see that it is, pardon me, so you can see that it is highlighting all of the objects on the striping layer. So this gives you a really handy way to interact with this Xreference, and you can even turn these layers on and off. So I've just hidden that layer in this drawing to make it more usable to me because I'm not interested in all of those parking lot stripes. So the Drawing Data view has become a lot more useful with this release as far as delineating objects and things like that. So once again, if you're not using the Drawing Data Manager, you should be because it gives you access to everything. If you cannot find something, this should help you out because it can delineate any object. If I I'm now delineating the point labels. You can see that delineated over here. Let's take a look at the binding, and we'll go ahead and bind this. So you'll see how that works. So if I go to Xreferences and bind this, I'll say yes, and now these are all the individual objects. And just be aware that once you do this, they're no longer live with this drawing, with the CAD drawing. So you can, it's the same hazard of working with a CAD file that you've all run into from time to time, where people haven't realized they've moved something or they missed a snap or whatever. Same hazards here. I can also unload this. We'll go ahead and say yes. It disappears from the drawing. Now that's an unload. If we go back to the Drawing Data Manager, and I'll refresh it to make sure we're up to date, notice the Xreference is still here in the Drawing Data Manager. That's because unloading it does not remove it from the drawing. We retain that reference. So at any time, I could come in here and I could reload that. And let's regenerate, and it comes back into the drawing. So you've got a lot of interaction here. Now, I'm going to just delete this Xreference. Let's see. I don't have delete in that. We should. Oh, wait a minute. I just do that. Duh, sorry. It's morning. I need more coffee. Now we're going to look at one of what I see as the most important aspects of working with Xreferences in Traverse PC. How many times have you sent out your data to the architects or engineers, and they're working in CAD, and they're not surveyors, so they don't give a darn about coordinates, right? So you're working in your coordinate system, you know where things are, you send it out to them, they send back their changes, and lo and behold, they've moved everything. All right, so let's take a look at what do we do in that case. I'm going to go ahead and insert a different Xreference. I'm going to choose this file. So I've inserted my Xreference. I go ahead and regenerate the drawing. Wait a minute, it's not here. Where is it? Okay, well, let's zoom extents and see if we can find out. Yep, they went and moved it on me. Ah, man, those guys, I swear. All right, so what do we do now? We can't move this thing. It's an Xreference. If we had imported it, then, you know, I could maybe make it a group or something like that and then reference it. But what can I do with an Xreference? Well, what I can do, I can right-click this Xreference, and I can reference the Xref to survey. This works just like the way we would reference a picture to survey. So let's walk through it. I'm going to choose reference it, and it's always keep your eye on the status bar down here. It's telling me that I need to select the first survey point, and I want this lower left property corner. So I'm going to use the E key to do a snap end, because I want that property corner at the west end of that line. All right, so I've got that. Now it says select the matching point in the group, and I can use snaps again. Let's zoom in here. I got to find that property corner in the Xreference. Okay, it's at the end of this line, so I'm going to hit E for end, put my cursor on this line, left click it, and I've chosen that same point in this Xreference. Let's do a zoom page. And now I'm going to want this point right up here. So I'm going to do an E for end. And let's get closer to the north end of this line than the south end. And okay, I got that point. Now once again, let's zoom in on our Xreference. And it's right up in here. A little hard to get to. I'm going to do an E for end. Let's see if this line won't get it for me. And it did. Okay, so the Xreference has disappeared. If we zoom page again, Now this is perfectly referenced to our survey. So I can deal with these files where they have moved our data. As long as I can pick 2 points in the X reference to match up with my data, I can get their data where it should be to begin with. This also solves the problem when you receive a CAD file that's in a different unit of measure than what you're working with. So we've had files that come from architects that are in inches rather than in feet. Well, this solves that issue because I will reference it and it will be scaled then into feet. At that point, I can work with this data the same way I would work with any other imported CAD data. So the Xrefs have become very, very useful, and I think you're going to see some more improvements using Xrefs in the future. Now, this is a fun one. We're going to take a look at tangent intersections. I've had a lot of fun with this one. John put a lot of work into programming this. This is not something you need all the time, but it can certainly come in handy in certain cases. We had a user who really needed this, and we figured, well, we need to program that. So let's take a look at this. I really enjoy working with this tool. Okay, so we've got this scaled in to look at these 2 curves on these 2 lots. So what if we need to find, say, the tangent intersection between this point and this curve? Here's how we do it. We're going to go to COGO, tangent intersect. Now, this COGO tool is just like all the other COGO tools in Traverse PC. Wherever you see these buttons, these are the graphic pick buttons. Hopefully you're familiar with these. It makes it easier. I can type in what I need or I can pick them graphically. So I'm going to pick that point. So I'm going to click that button. Notice that it's blue now. I'll go ahead and left click on that point label and I've got that point in there. Now I want to go to the tangent of that curve, wherever that is. So I'm going to pick this curve. So I click that button and click on the curve, and it's filled that in, and you see I have one possible intersection. Now, like with our other intersection tools, and with curves in general, if I accept intersections beyond the end, that'll open up the second possible intersection as that curve becomes a full circle. I'll turn that off. Let's go ahead and save this and plot it so we can see where that is. So you can see there it is. Now let's take a look at this let's just verify that that looks right. You know, it kind of looks right, but let's go ahead and put those points in a traverse. I'm not worried about the name or any of this other stuff. I'm just going to say, okay, let's put this guy in and this guy in. And so now I can see that line. Yeah, that appears to be tangent. If I really wanted to go further with it, I could extend that line out. And so now I can really see that that is definitely tangent. Let's go ahead and undo this. And let's get rid of that traverse. So what if we need to find the intersection of the 2 tangents? I'm going to go ahead and clear this. So I'm going to pick the first curve, pick the second curve, and I have one possible intersection for each one. I'll go ahead and save it, plot it, save it, plot it, and there are my 2 intersection points. Okay, I'll go ahead and undo this, and now let's take a look at something that I really found to be kind of neat to check out. I'm going to edit this traverse, and I'm going to do a right-of-way offset. What if I need What if I need to intersect the tangent of a curve that doesn't exist? All right, so I want to intersect the tangent of this curve, but out here where the curve would be if it were offset 25 feet. That's why I've done this 25-foot offset. So let's see how this works. COGO, tangent intersection. Make sure this is cleared. And I'm going to choose my point first. You don't have to. You could choose the curve first. It doesn't matter. Choose the point. And now I'm going to choose my curve. Now I'm not going to choose this curve because that's an imaginary curve, right? And so I'm going to choose this curve here, but now I'm going to offset it negative 25. So 25 feet to the left. And I have one possible solution. I'm going to choose save and say plot, and there is the offset point right on that 25-foot offset that I created earlier. So I can calculate this point without even needing to create this curve. So my hat's off to John on this one. He put this tool together, and I know there was a lot of math involved in this one, and he did a great job on this. So let's take a look at the new leader stuff. I'm going to go ahead and change files here. All right, so hopefully you're all aware of the way the leaders work. Leaders are controlled, how they draw is controlled in your drawing settings. So if I go to the leaders tab of a drawing, I can choose what kind of line I want. Let's get a solid line. And I want arrowheads. Notice that there's a new option for dot. We'll look at that further in a minute. I'm going to choose solid arrows because most of my leaders I want arrowheads on. I like my arrowheads a little bit bigger. And I'll choose OK. Now, just a note for you guys, every now and then I get a call from somebody who wants to know, every time I start a new drawing, I have to go in and set up the leaders the way I want, or set this up the way, etc. Keep in mind, all of those drawing settings can be stored on your drawing template. So if you're having that problem, start a drawing using your drawing template that always has to be changed. Go in and set all of your drawing settings the way you like it and update your drawing template, and you won't have that problem in the future. Okay, so our regular leaders. Same leader we've had before. It's a 3-point leader. All right, works the same as it always has. But we've now added a curved leader. So I'm going to show you how this works. A curved leader, I define the two ends, and then I can bend it however I want it to be. All right. So this is the new tool here. The updated tool is, let's say that I want a leader that goes to an area. So I want a leader that's pointing to this area. Maybe I want to show the square footage and acreage with a leader, but I don't want to point specifically at something. Well, I might do something like this. I might do a curved leader, say. Let's do some. Oh, and I went the wrong way. Duh. Told you I need more coffee. Let's do that again. Let's do it like this. So now I've got this leader, but I don't want it to be pointing at something. So I can go in, I can right-click this leader, go to its properties, and I can tell it, no, I don't want an arrow on this. I want a dot. Make it whatever size I want. Say OK. And now I've got this area leader that I could put my square footage or acreage or whatever I want on this. Or maybe I'm pointing to a setback line, or not a line, a setback area, or a right-of-way area, something like that. So curved leaders and dot leaders. This is a tool that is, I really like this tool. It's very simple, but I really like it. let's take a look here. Let me clean up this drawing a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a offset to alignment. I don't know if you're not familiar with this tool. This is a tool that's well, it's designed for working, you know, road work and stuff, and finding out how far off your alignment things are. It's also a wonderful tool for finding out. Let's say you've got a fence line that should be on a property line, and we all know that those fence lines never are. Well, you can use this tool to compare it to your property line. Here's what this does. I'm going to go to COGO, and I'm going to do offset to alignment. I want to offset the entire road center line traverse, and I want to offset it to the tangents traverse. That's this one over here. I want to find out how far off this traverse all of these points are. So I'm going to go ahead and compute that, say OK. I'll close this. Now notice we got two of these points that are not perpendicular. There's no perpendicular for 100 and 101 because they're, if we do the perpendicular, they're past the end of this line. So, but what happened? I don't see any difference. Well, what happened is I now have a new traverse, this alignment offset traverse. So there's what it looks like. So it's showing me the offsets of the one traverse to the other traverse. So now, why have I done this? This is not new. That's been in the program long as I can remember. Here's why I did this. Because this gave me this traverse, and I don't care about any of this. This gave me this traverse that contains all of these offset points. Now, if I want to work with, say, all of these offset points or all of these control points, I would need, in the past, I would need to go and select all of these points, right, one at a time, using a control click to select them. It's a real pain. Okay, so what I've got now is I have a new tool here where I can select all points, protected points, occupied points, foresights, side shots, offsets, instrument heights, benchmarks, notes. This would be really handy. Let's say you imported a TDS raw file and you had the option on to include notes and all, and you've got this traverse that has 10 times more notes than it has points. Well, I could select them all very easily here, just like this. I'm going to select all my offset points. All right, so now let's say that I want to add a description to all of these offset points I created. I can simply, now that they're all selected, I can simply enter that description on that one point, and it changes them. You can change all of these. I know John used it for, he was designing a parking lot recently for a church, and he had to play with the parking lot striping. So he just went in and selected all of those parking lot stripe side shots and just changed the angle on them to get what he needed. It changed them all at once. So this is a very handy tool. So I can do this. I could delete these points in the case of those note points that I don't want. Very handy. Okay, so that's in the edit menu, and select points, and a lot of new options here. Select the occupied points. Okay, so I could go ahead and try and delete them all, but that wouldn't work for occupied points in this case, but I could certainly edit them all. We've already looked at this. Once again, if you aren't already using the Drawing Data Manager, you're missing out on a great tool. All right. You've already seen the delineate objects. There's also an option for deleting unused blocks. If you've got a file that has a bunch of blocks in it that aren't used, you can delete the unused blocks in, say, an imported CAD file or something like that. LandXML surfaces with hidden faces. We ran into this recently, where one of our users had a LandXML file sent to him, and it had a bunch of hidden faces in it. Let's get this off of here, and let's go ahead and import a LandXML file. If you're not familiar with how this works, it's a little bit different kind of import. I'll go to File, Import, choose my file type, LandXML, browse for my LandXML file, and import it. Now with the LandXML import, Traverse PC asks, what do you want to import? I could just import the surface. I'm going to import the whole file. You know, you could have parcels, alignments, and all of that stuff. So it all depends on the file. I'm just going to tell it, give me everything. Say OK, and it has now imported that one surface. We've got our report on what happened, and we have a new traverse with 1967 points, and we have a surface. Let's go ahead and tag this surface. Zoom extents over here, and there's our surface. Let's go ahead and change the way this surface is drawn. Let's turn on the tin. No, I don't want to do that. Let's go, let's turn on the minor contours. Let's apply that. Now you can see that surface the way it looks. Let's go back to the tin. Let's draw the tin and break lines. And I'll go ahead and apply that. So now you see the tin the way it is. But look, there's an option to show invisible triangles. I'm going to turn this on and apply it. So in the program that created this surface, they're able to tell their program that they want certain triangles to be invisible. In Traverse PC, we use a border traverse to achieve basically the same thing. But we're going to be looking at this invisible triangle concept for some other things in Traverse PC. We've got some uses for this. I think you'll see some changes coming in 2018 regarding invisible triangles. So now I'm seeing all of the triangles here, including the invisible ones. If I turn this off, you'll see the difference here when I apply it. So you can see that there's invisible triangles out here, invisible triangles here, a lot of invisible triangles in this surface. All right, so you may not be running into this currently. That's probably a rare occasion, but be aware that that's there, and look for some more changes that will be coming that I think you'll like. Legal description decimal places. This isn't a biggie, but let's take a look. Well, it's a biggie for some people, but what I'm saying is it's not a huge change. So let's go into Lot 2. If you haven't done a legal description report, here's how it works. I'm in the Lot 2 Traverse, which I'm not displaying there right now. I go to Tools, and I'm sorry, I got lost here. My legal description report, there we go. We now have the option in our settings for the legal description to define the decimal places. So if I want to show bearings out to just minutes, I could do that, or distance to 1 decimal place, whatever you want to do on that, that's no problem. Now, if you're not, that's the straight legal description report. If you're not aware of this, and once again, the legal description report and the and what I'm about to show you have been here for a while. Whoops, that was a involuntary right-click twitch. So I've selected Lot 2 and Lot 3. There is a tool, if you're not familiar with it, in the Traverses Manager, where I can choose to create a Traverse report. Now, the Traverse report can include a lot of different data, including a legal description if you want. And you can choose to do it for selected traverses or all traverses, etc. I go to Settings and for the legal description, and I can set the decimal places here. So be aware of that if you weren't already. This is something that I personally love. We now have options and you may have already noticed this as I've been going to the Tasks Manager, we now have options in the Tasks Manager to show different things. And the way that's done, right down here, you can now format the Tasks Manager. And you have the option, I'm going to turn on File Name Only. When I set this to File Name Only, this is the way the Tasks Manager has always been. So I'm looking at this, and maybe you keep all your files in certain places. Well, for various reasons, I have files that are in a lot of different places. And it's hard to tell. I've got Learn Kogo up here. I've got Learn Kogo here. 2 sample subdivisions. Well, which one do I want? All right, that's the issue. Well, if I go into Format View, let's take a look at Drive Path File Name. I'll choose OK, and now it's showing me the entire path with the file name, but notice that can get very long. This one is truncated because it's just too long to fit. All right, let's go back. This is what I like. File name, folder, path. I'll choose OK. Here's what that means. So Learn Kogo is in my designated surveys folder, as is this file, this file, this file. This one's in samples. All right. This one's in a subfolder under my surveys. So I can see that. So I can see where these files are. This is in my designated shared folder in a subfolder. All right. Now let's take a look at the last option. So what if I don't remember where my shared folder is? Well, I can turn on Tooltips, say OK, and now, okay, where is my shared folder? I hover over this. Oh, it's on my T drive. Okay, so the tooltip now is showing me this is the best of both worlds. I've got this short description, so I can go right to it, or if I'm not sure, I can hover on it and get this tooltip to show me exactly what file I'm dealing with. Generic raw data, CSV, import, export improvements. Before and I'll show it to you. Basically, we added latitude, longitude, and height to the generic raw data import, but I want to talk about something that has confounded a few people. I want to talk about CSV raw data versus ASCII coordinates. If we go to File Import, and say no on this, let's take a look at generic raw data and our settings. They now have latitude, longitude, and height. First, let's talk about what is a CSV file. A CSV file is simply a comma-delimited text file. That's all it is. All right. It was created by Microsoft for their Excel program. And why do we have a generic raw data CSV import? Because there are a few people that deal with data that comes through Microsoft Excel for some reason. So they will then save their Excel spreadsheet as a CSV file with the various columns delineated with commas. All right. Notice I could come in here and I could set this up to read point, number, northing, easting, elevation, and description, just like a normal ASCII file. But then what if I need a generic raw data file? Then I have to reformat this, and these formats can be quite extensive, all right? So the reason I'm talking about this is that a lot of current data collectors, when you export a point list, just a common point number, northing, easting, elevation description file, the industry standard ASCII point list, they're calling it a CSV file. So people are coming to this generic raw data CSV, and then they're struggling to get it set up, all right? Keep in mind that if you've got just a point list from a data collector and it has a CSV extension, it's still just a common ASCII file, the same kind that we've used for decades in the survey industry. and most of them are formatted. Point number, northing, easting, elevation, description with each point on its own line. And if you're getting CSV files from your data collector, all you need to do, come in here to the settings and change the extension down here to star.csv, and you'll deal with your CSV files using the ASCII import export. All right. So keep that in mind. Use generic raw data for generic raw data. You'll save yourself a lot of hassles. Groups. Okay, I don't know how many of you work with traverse groups, drawing groups, or surface groups. Surface groups is probably the least likely, followed by drawing groups. Where it's used most of the time, from what I've seen, is with traverse groups. Let's load a different file here. It's a sample file, but this is subdivision we did a few years ago. Notice when I go to traverses, I'm displaying my groups. So for those of you who aren't familiar with traverse groups, I'm going to turn them off. So this is a complex file. It's a small subdivision. Imagine if this were a large subdivision. Imagine all the traverses you would have. And this is where it comes in on the drawings. I might have a lot more drawings as well. As it is, for this small subdivision, I do have a lot of drawings. All right, but I have even more traverses. So what I can do is I can use the traverse groups to show just what I want to show. Okay, so if you've used groups in the past, you'll know that, okay, so you're working on a file and you don't want to show this group, so you collapse it and just leave whatever groups you want uncollapsed. All right, so let's collapse this one. In the past, when you reloaded this file, all of your groups would be expanded. Now, if I go ahead and save this file and reopen it, when I open this file after having saved it, my groups are in the condition I left them in. So this is new. It's a little change, but it's nice for those of you that are working with groups.